come together and gather, but we always remember those who came before us. We come from a strong people, but we have to remember the strength that we have based on our DNA. So we stand on the shoulders of some mighty people who made it through all of that turmoil and destruction. Our heroes and sheroes who have made it and have helped us in our struggle. So if you can right now, just call out their names.
Sheila Walker, Ida B. Wells,
Yes.
Harriet Tubman, Ashe.
And I want to especially remember, because of this activity that we are participating in today, that we all remember Sheila Lorraine Walker. She was from Hot Springs, Arkansas, and raised on the south side of Chicago, amongst the modern civil rights era and the Black Power movement. She had a long battle with cancer and made her transition in March of this year, 2021, at 72 years. Let's call her name.
Sheila.
Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.
Thank you.
I never call Connie, and Connie is not there for me. This week, I must have talked to her about 100 times about the rain, and she kept saying, Pat, don't worry about it, it's not gonna rain. Pat, don't worry about it, it's not gonna rain. Even this morning, I called and I said, Connie, it's gonna rain. She said, Pat, it's not gonna rain. I'm gonna introduce you to my executive director, Connie Swenson.
I'm so happy to see all of you here. We were worried about the rain, but I wasn't going to tell Pat that.
Exactly.
I'm going to start out with a quick quote. I don't know who it was, but it fits Johnson House and what we're doing today. To focus on the uncomfortable concepts of slavery, racial injustice, and gender inequality, we must name the injury in order to heal from it. I'll let that sink in for a moment, because we try not to talk about it, but we must. J. Chester Johnson is a poet and nonfiction writer. He grew up one county removed from the Elaine Race Massacre site in southeast Arkansas along the Mississippi River Delta. He has written extensively, prose and poetry, on race and civil rights, composing the Litany for the National Day of Repentance in October 2008. Johnson returned to the town of his youth to teach in an African American public school before integration of the local education system. Several of his writings are part of the J. Chester Johnson collection in the Civil Rights Archives at Queens College, the alma mater for Andrew Goodman, one of 3 martyrs murdered by white supremacists in Mississippi during the Freedom Summer. His most recent book, Damaged Heritage, was released in May 2020. It's an Amazon bestseller and appears on Goodreads' summer list for best nonfiction books. Johnson served as co-chair of the Elaine Massacre Memorial Committee, which arranged for the funding, design, and construction of a permanent physical memorial dedicated in late September 2019 at the centennial of the massacre in Phillips County, Arkansas, site of the conflagration. For 100 years, no memorial to the massacre existed. And there is a photo of the memorial. Shortly after beginning his career, Ivor was introduced to Sheila Black, and there was an instant connection, culminating in their 50-year marriage, and he currently resides in Wilmington, Delaware. Sheila Lorraine Walker was born in Hot Springs, Arkansas. After a long, courageous battle with cancer, she left this world in March 2021 at age 72. She and her 7 siblings grew up poor. However, Sheila always lived with a rich, giving, and generous spirit. She carried her foremother's sense of activism and social justice through her life by remaining steadfastly devoted to the principles of Black liberation and justice. After retirement, she dedicated much of her later years to promoting racial healing, justice, and reconciliation by traveling to Elaine, Arkansas, and continuing to speak out publicly on the legacy of the Elaine Massacre. Sheila was fun-loving and lived life to the fullest. She remains deeply loved, cherished, and missed by her family and friends. Thank you.
Tonight's featured author, J. Chester Johnson. So you grew up in the South in the 40s, and we'd love for you if you could tell us what life was like at that time.
Both sides of my family came from Arkansas. That's where the Elaine Race Massacre occurred. But I ended up being born in Chattanooga, Tennessee. After a year, my father died, and my mother didn't do particularly well. So I lived with my maternal grandparents, Hetty and Lonnie Birch, in Little Rock. Now, Lonnie Birch spent his entire career with the Missouri Pacific Railroad. And as the story unfolds today, you'll see that Missouri Pacific Railroad had a very important participation, a very bloody participation in the massacre.
Thank you, Chester. Let's go back to 1919, September 30th. Can you tell us exactly what the massacre was?
So there were about 100 African Americans in Hoopsburg Church. T-model Ford pulls up, and two white men stepped out of the automobile. One was the deputy sheriff of Phillips County, and the other was the security agent for the Missouri Pacific Railroad. Remember, Lonnie worked for the Missouri Pacific Railroad. And as soon as they stepped out of the car, they started to fire into the Hoopsburg Church. So people in the church started running for the exits, jumping out of windows, running into the cotton fields that surrounded Hoopsburg Church. That engagement, that beginning of the massacre occurred all that morning. A lot of the African Americans jumped into Galvin Slough to hide from the attacking white posses. My theory is that both of the, or at least one of the men was actually killed by friendly fire. Another person was killed. My opinion there, that the allegation was that he had been shot in the back by some African American. But actually, I think he somehow his gun got dislodged and he shot himself with his own pistol.
As you went on that pilgrimage, like you said, you also learned the legal implications from that. And I was wondering if you could tell us, as a result of those findings and the massacre occurring, there was a series of legal actions that led up to the Supreme Court case Moore versus Dempsey. And I wanted to know if you could share how that case in particular was really instrumental to the civil rights movement.
Thank you. As I indicated, 300 African Americans were impounded in various jails and buildings. 122 of the 300 were indicted for crimes ranging from first-degree murder to night riding, or disturbance. Late October and early November, trials started. There were 74 individuals who were found guilty of first-degree murder, various kinds of violent crimes related to the Elaine Race Massacre. There were people who actually participated in the killings through the posses in Hoopsburg, who ended up being part of the juries. In many instances, the juries were out no more than 2 minutes in finding the 74 guilty. On November the 21st, the 74 boarded a train with 62 going to Cummins Prison Farm, the other 12 going to the Walls Penitentiary, where those 12 were to be executed, electrocuted.
This is Sheila. This is my honey, my love, the love of my life. And I miss her dearly. The most approachable person that I've ever met. She was just so giving, considerate. She was always ready to listen. She used to relate how people would come and tell her their life stories. Always had a smile on her face. When we had her service, we did a Zoom conference service. There were 150 people on that Zoom call. The common theme with what everybody said was how much they felt accepted and loved, and no matter how fleeting, no matter how. She was an excellent cook, and she was just unbelievable. She was born in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Little snippets of the massacre would pass by her in her house, but she was never able to get a full story. Whenever it came time for her grandmother to give some kind of a reckoning or a story about it, she could not. She was so traumatized that she would shake and tremble and cry and never be able to get her story out. And so it was one of Sheila's projects to do research and to try to find out about as much as she could about the massacre. Robert Whitaker first called Sheila, would you like to meet one of the descendants of the white side of the family, of the conflagration, of the massacre?
Sheila's great uncle, Albert Giles, was one of the 12. There were a series of steps that Scipio went through that each time that these 12 were to be executed, he would be able to maneuver the estoppel. Oliver Wendell Holmes had been pressing the court to become more aggressive under the 14th Amendment, but the Supreme Court for the last 50 years had made the determination that states are responsible for the civil rights of individuals, not the federal government, and certainly not the Supreme Court. And that precedent had prevailed over the 50 years.
This is in the foreword in the book, starting on page 23. In the last paragraph, it says, she says, the capacity to personally forgive Chester's grandfather, which is in another part of the story that you will hear from Chester as to his association with his grandfather. The capacity to personally forgive Chester's grandfather became easy. I know that all humans are born with inherent goodness, which can often be overshadowed by an oppressive society that teaches us hate and individual circumstances that are far from ideal. The result, we all make mistakes, and some of us do very bad things. If we're lucky and blessed, we get the opportunity to make an honest account of the hurt surrounding us, and then mend fences with both those we have hurt and those who have hurt us. Truth and reconciliation. Chester and I strive to support each other and our people on the path of truth and reconciliation for everyone touched by the Elaine massacre. This book is one of many steps that Chester has taken on that path, and I am pleased to now be a friend and witness to his journey. So she was able to, in dealing with Chester and being associated with Chester's story, be able to also comfort herself on the trauma that her family went through for that massacre.
Great, thank you. We're gonna open the floor now to questions.
I have a question, and Chester, you can answer this question or not. I want to ask you, you've told me your story. You told me about how wonderful your grandfather was for you. He was your hero. He took care of you. He loved you. Have you forgiven him in your journey?
Wow, how did you know what the whole story?
Because I read your book.
Oh, okay, all right. No, I haven't. I will tell you, up until like 2 weeks before Sheila Walker died, she was on my case. She was continually on my case because she had forgiven Lonnie.
Yes, and you have not.
And she opened by doing that opened up a capacity for our relationship that wouldn't have existed. I haven't gotten there. I cannot. Because in some ways he has become the face of racism to me, because I've had a large number of family members turn against me, and he has become that face. And I haven't gotten there, and I am seeking, and God knows, my Lord knows it. I want to do that. I want to reach that point. I'm not there yet. I haven't been able to forgive.
I thank you for sharing that with me, and I didn't mean to ask you a disclosure if you were not comfortable doing it. So thank you